We've covered a lot of different franchises in comparison to Warhammer 40k. How strong are they? Could they fight back against the laughing gods? And do they stack up to the endless armies of the grimdark future? But today, something new, something different. While a few factions from other series could have teamed up with various factions in 40k, like the IMC, Viltrumites, or Helldivers packing up as a part of the genocidal Imperium to spread righteous fury, today we're looking at an ally, or perhaps curse, from within. Today, all you beautiful ladies and animals, I ask you, what would the Imperium of mankind look like if the X gene suddenly appeared? So join me as we go over the Abhumans of 40k and compare them to the many mutants of the Marvel Universe. But before we dive in, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you like videos like this and want even more in the future. And without further ado, let's get into it. As per the Warhammer Lexiconum, in an Imperium where genetic mutation and spiritual corruption are often interrelated, Abhumans are a focus of much controversy. In more liberal times under the Emperor, even markedly divergent Abhumans such as the Beastmen could serve in the Imperial Guard and Militarum Auxilia. Since the Emperor's stasis, however, only the lesser deviants, such as Ogrins and Ratlings, are considered Imperial citizens. However, they are still distrusted by the more Puritan members of the Inquisition. From the recognizable Ogrin, essentially ogre humans, to legally distinct hobbits in the form of Ratlings. Abhumans are still human, just mutated enough to classify as a different species. An ogre next to any guardsman, genetically, is like plopping down a Saint Bernard next to a corgi. Both dogs, both canines, but very, very different and used for different purposes. Most Abhumans are allowed as long as they are useful. Roughly, if they have 2 legs, 2 arms, a head, and 2 eyes, the Imperium gives them a discerning glance, but allows them to be citizens. Not that being an Imperial citizen is any great honor, but it's better than having Grey Knights dropped on your head. But it does mean, depending on the aberration, the Imperium, or more specifically the Inquisition, would be more or less accepting of them, with obvious examples like the Beastmen and even the Wolfin from Fenris under incredible scrutiny, whereas the Ogrin are pretty much an accepted member of the Imperial cult. Now, Abhumans are known and separate from what the Imperium defines as mutants. In 40k, mutants are either humans touched by chaos, those transformed by demons, or ones such as the Gene Stealers, modified. Mutants are not born as such, they are made to be mutant later in life. A one-off creature, not a species with a tangible, expected amount of genetics. This definition is important because in Marvel, the way the term mutant is used is retained exclusively for members of humanity who carry the X gene, or the thing that makes mutants, versus those who are mutated later in life, like the Spider-Man or Bruce Banner, who they call mutates. In the context of Warhammer, Marvel's mutants are more akin to Abhumans, but draw the line at some points into mutant territory. Still human with a genetic change, a general mutation that can be passed down through children. Now, instead of looking like rat people or human-shaped ogres, the X gene manifests in laser eyes, bone claws, or control of magnetism. But whether or not they're allowed at all will depend on the Inquisition that identifies them, as each mutant, especially those who possess powers that are similar to the psychic manifestations of the Warp, will probably be accused of heresy first. But let's get into the mutants. A man with unbreakable bones, claws, and a healing factor so good that it makes the Astartes jealous sounds like an Ogrin with extra steps, but does Logan's animalistic nature help him or hurt his chances of being human enough? As our first example, Wolverine's mutation isn't even that crazy for 40k. He's actually not far off from the Wolfin, but he can still totally blend in with others around him. He looks human, he acts human, he's just faster, stronger, heals, and has claws. Likely, he wouldn't even be too much of an outsider, as there's so much craziness in 40k that would make someone like Logan fit right in. As for the Greater Imperium, he would likely just be regarded as a specialty kind of human, if not even applicable for Space Marine training. Although whether or not he could have the extra organs implanted would be the greater question here. Stronger and more fit than regular humans from the beginning, and basically a super soldier before any augmentations. But he's still fairly human, and unless Logan turns into a crazy rogue agent and rebels from the Imperium, there's a great chance he's allowed to just continue as normal, fighting forevermore in the grimdark future. This mutant is approved for service. A smooth-talking rogue with explosive playing cards, Gambit's flashy powers might be a hard sell, but his skills and charm would make him a perfect candidate for an Imperial assassin, if they didn't brand him a psyker first. Taking basically anything and charging them up with a pink glow, while Raimi still appears to be human on the surface, unlike Logan's purely physical abilities, the Gambit's more magical card tricks would set off red flags for the Inquisition immediately. Now, under the assumption that a mutant like Raimi isn't instantly executed because the Inquisition would rather kill now and maybe ask why later? But if they decide not to do that, he's going to be scrutinized incredibly for chaos corruption and would have to spend nearly every day of his life atoning for the sin of being born differently. Possibly fighting on the front lines, perhaps being tortured upon an Inquisitor's ship. Either way, the deck is handed to him, the Gambit is drawing a blank. This mutant requires repentance in the field. Teleportation, blue skin, and a prehensile tail. Nightcrawler has more in common with a sanctioned mutant than an abhuman. But could his piety and devotion to faith win over the ecclesiarchy, or would they just mistake him for a demon? Likely, between the powers and appearance, Kurt is getting the true demon treatment. Now yes, he's devoted to outdated 21st century faith, but that's not in line with the Imperial cult. And if Gambit was testing the line, this is a mutant that gets shot first, with questions never coming after. Maybe in a more liberal Imperium under the Emperor, Wagner and those like him would be more acceptable, but in the 41st millennium where paranoia is king, the Nightcrawler is getting labeled as a mutant and sanctioned for execution. This mutant may feel the Emperor's mercy. An unbreakable steel body and the heart of a loyal warrior, Colossus seems like an easy fit for a sanctioned abhuman. But does his transformations make him too unpredictable? Like Ogren, Colossus is still very human on appearance, and while different when transformed, the backbone of the X-Men is still a powerhouse. Likely used for his strength and abilities much the same as Wolverine, the Colossus is mainly a physically mutated mutant. So them keeping him around to use as a weapon, there's a pretty good chance for that. This mutant may serve on the front lines. A powerful psychic with the ability to control minds? Yeah, there's no way the Imperium will let this one slide. The real question is, would they make him an alpha-level psyker asset, or just execute him on sight? Now, the main thing is whether or not Xavier would be able to resist the warp. As we've seen with other telepaths in 40k, the most powerful among them always seem to fall to chaos, or they're the Emperor. There's a few ways they deal with someone who has the psychic abilities of Xavier. Likely, none of them good for him, because even with his latent psychic abilities not derived from the corruptive force of the warp, the Imperium refuses to acknowledge nuance. They will treat him as a psyker regardless. With his wisdom, he may become a type of communicator, basically a magical telephone for the Imperium, or he gets strapped in a prison and is tested for corruption. Or he's simply put on a black spaceship so that his soul can be fed to the Emperor in order to keep the Astronomicon powered for at least a day longer. This mutant is being placed in the hands of the Inquisition. Weather control on a planetary scale. That's straight into Living Saint territory, but would Storm's mutant status overshadow her godlike abilities in the eyes of the Imperium? Now, like many of the others, she'd have to be tested for corruption, but with an immense power set that turns entire armies of metal giants to scrap, her abilities proving to make her into a one-woman army unlike anything else. Unlike the Professor, whose psychic powers are a dime a dozen in the Imperium, Storm's more unique flavor of destruction would make her a valuable asset for the Imperium. While still regarded with skepticism and the highest levels of scrutiny, Storm would be like an attack dog for the Imperium, strategically deployed across worlds, shredding their enemies to pieces before being retrieved and kept for the next battle. This mutant will serve the Emperor's angels well. A leader, a tactician, and a man whose eyes shoot death beams. If the Imperium could harness his power, he'd be a walking artillery unit. But is controlled destruction enough to make him an abhuman, or is he just another mutant threat? Obviously, Scott is human to the core, and while his eye beam is out of the ordinary, it is still one of a kind and incredibly powerful. Adopted into the Imperial Guard, he'd be a powerhouse, cutting down enemy tanks and vehicles and even splitting Space Marine Terminators in half with his laser so powerful, he can softly land with it. If you don't understand why that's so impressive, watch a Hank Green video. This mutant is good for the front lines, an effective weapon. Now, what happens if he falls behind enemy lines? What if the Sons of Fulgrim came upon him, trapped him, and dragged him down to the lair of Fabius Bile? Legions of Noise Marines empowered with the eyesight that matches stars. What then? What the... Hyper-intelligent, physically powerful, and covered in blue fur, Beast could slot in as a sanctioned bioengineer or even a Jokero-adjacent tech specialist if the Imperium doesn't just see a dangerous mutant in need of a bolter round. Like with the others of the X-Men who take on a more unconventional appearance, Beast's reception among the greater Imperium will be greatly determined upon who he is sanctioned with. The hateful Sons of Dorn who crusade all millennia around? He would be put down. A heretic, a mutant. No matter how smart he may be, the Imperium is fine with wiping away one mind if it means they are one body closer to a cleansed galaxy. Now among the Salamanders, in Ultramar or perhaps with an Inquisitor who favors the well-spoken Blue Beast, he could find his way into the Imperium at acceptable levels. As a specialized squadron of mutants who are smart but also handy in tight spaces and incredibly strong would make him an invaluable asset for data recovery and general maintenance among Mechanicus facilities. This mutant will serve the Omnissiah well. Control over magnetism and a philosophy that echoes both the Imperium's worst fears and deepest truths. Magneto is powerful enough to rival some of the Imperium's greatest weapons, but would his ideology make him a revolutionary, or just another heretic? Now, there's two ways to do this, and I've kind of skirted the line across the rest of the X-Men so far. Are we taking Eric from the Marvel Universe and planting him into 40K, or are we making a new Eric? One who was born among the hive worlds of the Imperium? Well, as the nature of this video entails, I'm going to run this as the latter. And of course, as often we see, Magneto is strong to levels untold of even the 40K universe. The master of magnetism lifts entire stadiums, entire bridges with nothing but his strength, and that was even in his old age. His control of metal is so precise that he can disassemble multiple firearms all at the same time, making mechanical weapons inert. So specialized that even digging the iron out of someone's blood is a threat to all around him. Now, in the event of an Eric being born in 40K, if not scrutinized as an unsanctioned psyker, his anti-discriminatory character would be revealed in the paranoia and hate of the Imperium. The Imperium, who are so vividly based on the same systems of paranoia and vibrant oppression that would have killed all his family and tortured his memories for years in the prime timeline of his life. When trading one fascist regime for another.
Bigot. Ingrate. Sycophant. Worm, small I could smite you with a step.
Faced with an empire built on oppression and the ruthless extermination of those deemed impure, Magneto would not kneel, not to the ecclesiarchy, not to the Inquisition, not to the Golden Corpse that held the galaxy in its rotting grip. No, Magneto would do what he has always done, rally the outcasts, the discarded, the ones deemed lesser. On any one of the millions of smog-choked hive worlds, the birth of a legend begins. A world of endless forges, sprawling underhives, and towering spires where the wealthy exploit the downtrodden, ripe for revolution. It starts small, whispers among the laborers, missing patrols, Arbites officers found hanging in the air, choked by their own breastplates, their weapons dismantled into their base components. Then it escalates. The manufactoriums grind to a halt. Trains derail mid-transit. Tanks rip themselves apart before they ever leave the armory. The planetary governor's palace crumbles under its own weight as the very metal beams holding it together twist and shift like living serpents. The few Astartes stationed on the planet find their power armor turned against them, servos locking, helmets crushing inward, bolters melting in their gauntlets. And above it all, floating high in the smog-filled sky, he watches. A crimson-cloaked specter, arms outstretched, eyes burning with righteous fury. The Imperium, of course, will not stand for this. The Inquisition declares him Homo extremis, a mutation so dangerous it warrants immediate extermination. An entire fleet is mobilized, led by a force of Grey Knights, ready to burn the hive world to the ground if it means wiping out Magneto, who they deem as a psyker beyond control, and his growing rebellion alongside it. But Magneto is no fool. He would have been prepared. Defense grids turn against their masters. Battleships in orbit suffer catastrophic failures as their own hulls warp and twist. Even the mighty Astartes find themselves struggling as their armor and weapons betray them. For a moment, just a moment, the Imperium trembles. But Magneto is not a god. Even he cannot stand against the full weight of the Emperor's will forever. The forces of the Imperium will push back. The war will turn against him. Yet, even if he falls, even if his body is burned to ash in a holy purge, his message will remain. You are not weak. You are not less. You are the future. And the future will not be shackled. This mutant is the Emperor's nightmare. So, like the many Abhumans before them, these mutants are something different, a deviation, an exception, maybe even an evolution. And for a moment, they shine. Maybe they rise above their station, carve out an empire, prove they are more than just another footnote in the Imperium's archives. But this is Warhammer, and in Warhammer, nothing lasts. Because no matter how powerful a mutant becomes, whether they're moving mountains with a thought or bending entire hive worlds to their will, the Imperium doesn't care. The boot always comes down. The Inquisition will burn them as heretics. The Guard will drown them in bodies. And the Astartes, well, they'll do what they always do. Eradicate anything that doesn't fit the Imperium's perfect, rotting vision. In the end, they're not saviors. They're not rulers. They're not even monsters. They're just another failed experiment in a galaxy that only tolerates the status quo. Big thanks, as always, to all the members and patrons who keep this channel running. If you're new here, you can become a member for just $1 a month to vote on upcoming videos, get early access to said videos, and see some behind-the-scenes content. Also, check out the links below for my charity merch. 100% of what I make goes either right to my local food bank or to the Trevor Project with our Pride stuff. As always, stay cool, have fun, and be awesome. Buster out.